Guys, at long last, Space Wheeljack is here. And yes, it's not exactly in the form that I ever anticipated, and I do think that you all deserved a Space Wheeljack out of the Siege Ironhide. But at the end of all this frustration to get to this point, my desire for vengeance on Impactor has dulled, and honestly, I'm pretty satisfied. But first, your likes! Please give. And if you enjoyed this video by the end and you aren't subscribed already, please consider it. It's Space Wheeljack 2 Electric Jackaloo. That name sounds vaguely sexual. Who is or is not a buzzworthy figure? It's really not clear anymore. And I know a lot of people are going to complain that this is very kibble heavy, which the one based on Ironhide just wasn't. He's got giant goofy shoes and a big folding table on his back. But I'm gonna be honest, it doesn't bother me. And I think that's kind of thanks to the Earthrise figure. Look, I know a lot of people love that thing, but it fucking sucks. The robot mode is misproportioned to hell, giving him monkey-long arms. The chest is the horribly wrong shape. The transformation is breakable, frustrating, and boring. And then the alt mode just doesn't look like him. At all. It's a weird little wedge on wheels that would more pass for his Cybertronian self than an Earth mode. But this, despite the luggage he's carrying on his legs and his back, it has his vibe. When I look at this, I feel Wheeljack, and it fills my soul with a happiness I normally reserve for finding a long-lost toy from my childhood. Even more so than the custom Space Wheeljack I own, who doesn't have any of those issues, only a little hollowness from behind. I love this thing deeply. It's super cool, and that's maybe kind of the problem. Wheeljack isn't supposed to be so athletic and tough looking. I don't mean to say that this doesn't look like him. It very much does. But like his cooler, bigger brother that the Prime douchebag wishes he could be. But this, it's a little chunky, but it's Wheeljack. It's just so him. I hate to be esoteric like this, but it's rare that I get a figure that's capturing the essence so precisely. Even rarer still that it has this many diversions, and yet it still manages it. And I want to be clear that even if this wasn't doing such a good job in this respect, it's still not bad. I've seen figures with worse backpacks. I've seen figures with chunkier legs, and almost none of them are trying to do half of what this is trying to do. So while I don't think it even needs forgiveness, it would earn that anyways. It's got some fat kibble, but it still looks good. Now this is a Voyager, and as you can see here, he's a little smaller than the Siege Deluxe, which, I mean, is somewhat understandable. That's one of the bigger deluxes they've ever released. More concerning is that he's a hair shorter than the Deluxe Space Jazz that he goes with, but I'm happy to ignore that for two reasons. One, he's noticeably wider, and by weight over a quarter heavier, and two, unlike Jazz, he doesn't suck. A lot of people get mad at me for not liking that Jazz, but no, Space Jazz is trash. It's got an ugly chest, below average posability, and one of the simplest and worst transformations I've ever handled. Fuck how little you do, and fuck how hard it is to do it. However, I can say that I'm glad to get all three. As a team, they're beautiful to me, and I just hope that they continue with this. Not only do I need an accurate Tetrajet, because the Siege figure, while amazing, just doesn't look right for my needs, but I also just need them to start making up space modes. Someone get Fluoro Deary on the phone and demand he design a Cybertronian alt mode for Optimus Prime and everyone else. I need it. Anyways, wrapping back around to my actual point, because I'm an insane person who can't control their train of thought, this is a little small for a Voyager, but it's not tiny for one. And for once, I get it. This isn't like an 86 Hot Rod situation where it just feels like an advanced deluxe, and given the scale concerns as well as the amount of engineering that went into this, they were doing a lot. And despite its size, I think that they earned the Voyager designation. If I have any issues with the way this thing looks or its build, it's that the backpack comes untabbed a little too easily, and that the neck is on this pivoting hinge for seemingly no reason, and while that does add a bit of posability, it comes undone like Jobby's fly whenever he talks about a female character, so it's weirdly frustrating. But outside that, the build feels really durable, it's nice and heavy, it feels good in your hands. It's not like Siege Optimus levels of hand candy, but when I pick this thing up, I immediately feel joy. Oh, I suppose one other criticism I can levy at the way this thing looks is the back wings. Obviously, they aren't supposed to be sandwiched between anything like this, but I'm not concerned about that. I more just don't care about the fact that they're made out of plain white plastic. Also, they're just kind of really small. But that's a huge nitpick. I'd honestly struggle to tell you which one of these looks more put together. The Siege version has less kibble and a cleaner silhouette, but this one is compacting a little more purposefully, and he has a much more cohesive crotch section. I will say that I appreciate that his sculpting is a lot more in line with the other two, as it does make him look like he belongs with them better. And none of these has really been light on the kibble. Hell, Bumblebee basically has the same situation going on for all of his, just in yellow. Chunky legs covered in crap and a double folding backpack. Actually, no, that describes all three of these. The head is fantastic. Some people are going to be like, how can you make any distinctions between any of Wheeljack's heads? They're all the same. But this one is crisper and sharper than the Earthrise one. It's got squarer ears and more pronounced eyes. I absolutely adore this head on old Slinky Face. The only way to get this even more right is if his ears were made out of like a crystal that can light up that way that only 80s cartoons knew how to do. You know the one. The kind that makes you want to just stare at the screen with your brain off for hours on end like some kind of human-moth hybrid. So in the looks department, I think this is fantastic. It's got some issues, yes. The problem is, it had to have those issues to do the things it does later in this video. This needed to do a lot, and I think they packed all of that very respectably into a figure of this scale. But even if they were doing less, I think that this thing would go from impressive to fine. There's nothing here that I think is a deal breaker, it's just less than perfect. I feel like I'm being an apologist for this figure, and honestly, it doesn't need that. As for accessories, he's coming with his shoulder cannon. It's a little small this time, but it looks a ton better than the Earthrise's stumpy chode of a thing, and they mounted it like sane people this time, so it can actually swivel unlike that thing, pointlessly couldn't. And he can hold it like a gun and not sideways like some kind of idiot. He also comes with his two thingies. These have almost no use in robot mode, but they are meant for the alt mode, and they can be stored on his forearms and back. These don't look quite right. They were a lot thinner in the show when he used them to, I don't know, grind up fire, blow out napalm with a desk fan. You can attach these to his shoulder cannon, and now it looks like some kind of mine thrower or something. Is this Evo Fusion? This is the most Siege thing since Hound, and that's really sad. He also has his blast shield, which looks enough like it's supposed to that I'm happy. Though, it does come misassembled out of the box, so get ready to pop that part apart. So the accessories are pretty decent. He's got those two things from that one time, and that one thing from that same time, which is kind of a rare thing to say for a Chug figure. And he's got a better rendition of his shoulder cannon than we've gotten in a long time. And despite being a Chunkmeister, posability is actually probably better than average. Head has a full rotation, more side to side than normal, more up down than normal, and you can untransform it for even more. Shoulders and elbows both pull a 90, wrist swivel and sword wielding wrists, hips are unimpeded forward and to the side, but are pretty impeded going back, slightly better than 90 knees, sideways mafia knees, and feet with an extreme tilt up, a good tilt down, rotation, and a pivot in both directions. So the backwards on the legs is well below average, and that's really the bad of it. You'd think looking at him he'd be way worse, but he's actually better than average. He's probably better than the Siege one, honestly, which is not something I was prepared to say. Then transformation on this guy is shockingly really fun. Yes, it's very panel heavy, and you are basically turning him into a shell, and sometimes it can be tricky getting things lined up properly, but the process is intricate while not being finicky, and the act of putting everything together is very satisfying as it all seals up so tightly. The Siege one is very good as well, being a bit more advanced than the normal Ironhide, but it also being a custom means that I'm constantly worried about damaging it, where if it were a production figure, I wouldn't have that concern. So it's less fun than it could be, but it's still quite enjoyable. And when you're done, you will discover the fact that this thing apparently had weird proportions in robot mode, so it could mass shift. It's hard to explain just how much bigger this thing gets, so I'm gonna stick it next to the Siege version and remind you all that it used to be significantly smaller than the custom figure. It's not quite as long as that thing, just being edged out, but in all other dimensions, it's way bigger. And of the two, it's the far more accurate. The Siege version is a good retool to make it more like something that it was never meant to be. This is just the thing that it's supposed to be. It probably needed to be a bit longer, but I'm not mad at it. And they packed it with gimmicks. For starters, this does the thing with the things. They fall off a little too easily, but this is some kind of $400 masterpiece BS they're on for 30 bucks. You can give him the blast shield that's like a car putting on some shades to protect it from gunfire. Why doesn't everyone have this if this actually works? You can mount the fuel rods Bumblebee came with on the sides if you have one of those as well, though they just kind of press into place when I really want them to click in, and I was only able to find 5 of these things in 2 different baggies for some reason. OCD man, very sad. These just come off too easily, and while this is a fun added gimmick, this is something that they invented for this figure, because this isn't how he carried them in the show. He just stored them all up in his butt, along with Bumblebee. It's not gay, it's 4. This doesn't slide in as easily as it did in the show, as you kind of really have to open up Wheeljack, fold up Bumblebee a bit, and then fight it all back closed. But hey, you can stuff Bumblebee up his butt just like you always wanted to. And again, I want to highlight that despite being replete with gimmicks, this looks incredibly correct. It can't roll, and I mean, how hard would it have been to put some casters up in here somewhere? But they managed to fit so much into this thing that it's truly impressive. Yes, it's a Voyager, but I think the price is right. And it just looks so good sitting on my shelf along with its buddies that I can't help but love this thing. It's doing everything great. Not perfectly, but its worst grade is like a C+, maybe a B-. It looks like the character and has their energy to an extreme extent, while having some solid kibble. It feels good and well made, it's got a lot of accessories and a lot of accessory integration, feeling like they gave this part some real thought, and including a lot of really niche stuff. The posability is above average, the transformation is fun and different while being only a tad finicky, and the alt mode is pretty near perfect. It's 35 bucks all said and done, but considering the gimmicks in the robot mode and the amazing alt mode and all the accessories meant to be from single shots from the show, yeah, I'll say it. This is a micro masterpiece. Hell, it might be aiming for that title the most of any of the figures I've ever covered. Now before we go, let's thank a patron. And this time it's Music, whose favorite figure is a stand mixer. That's an inside joke that you'll have to join the Patreon Discord to get. No, for real, his favorite is Mecha Doragon. And man, I want this thing real bad. I got their Optimal Optimus, and that figure is just so cool. I also really want their Cryotech, and if you know me, you know what an achievement for the company that is. This is anime stylings in Beast Wars done right, and I love it so much. And that's not half what I have to say, but it's enough what I have to say. And I know, you know, what everyone else tells you to do at the end of these videos. So, if you liked what you saw here, please do that. And if you'd like to take it a step further, then please share this video with any friend you think may be interested. I hope you all enjoyed listening to me waste your time.